Hey guys, gals, and non-binary pals, and welcome back to the Fangirl Freaks Out Podcast. It's your host, Alyssa, and I have a couple of things that I need to talk about and address before I get into this episode, which is one that I've been very much looking forward to. But let's cover some things real quick. Firstly, I'm going to try to edit the audio a bit, but I am recording this on my phone just because like currently it is very hot where I live. There is a heat advisory because it's that hot. And two, like the audio uh, is going to probably likely need edited because I have a fan currently blowing at max speed at me because my AC doesn't work. Anyway, so that's one thing. The second thing I want to address is the delay in this episode. Last week I had fallen ill as well as having to deal with other health issues, so I wasn't able to record like I had hoped to and get the episode out on time. So because of that, I'm doing it now. I'm like trying to get it out to you guys now, and I'm at this point I'm pretty much fully recovered. There's still like a tiny bit of healing to do, but I'm doing okay now. I'm doing good enough to get this recorded and out to you guys. But I did want to, in addition to that, I do want to address the fact that like I do have health issues that can appear sporadically or like cause issues like at random moments. Like I'm never fully sure when an issue is going to arise there. So as much as I want to stick to the schedule that I have planned for this podcast, it might have to vary and there might be delays or like sometimes episodes might not just go up until like once a month, which I really don't want to do. I want to keep this every other week schedule that I just set for myself. And also too, on top of like once I start working, because that's something I need to do because I don't make money from this podcast, which is fine. I very much enjoy doing this anyway. This is more so for like a like fun little hobby to do, I guess. But with that being said, I do need to make money to live. So once I start working again, like if life gets busy and like my health becomes not so great, like I obviously am going to have to prioritize my health, which everyone should do. Like as much as you love doing something or like wanting to like I don't know, like if I don't know this your situation, but if say you want to like help others out and stuff or whatnot, like your health always comes first. It should always come first. Like take care of yourself because if you can't help yourself in the moment, how are you going to help anybody else? You know, like so self-care is very important. Remember that. So yeah. So for those reasons, like if I ever miss an episode because of health reasons, like again, like I said in the past, if you want updates on podcast episodes and stuff, and like if there's gonna have to be a delay or if I have to like cancel an episode for a week, like I will post that on my Twitter, which is at my hero corpse. Yeah, that's my app. And yeah. So, and then too, if I'm not recording the podcast, I've been trying to stream a bit recently over on Twitch at twitch.tv/Alyssa_0130. So you can always find me there too. And like on that, I give updates as well. Like I'll talk about what's going on with me and the podcast sometimes. But it's a fun time. I stream me playing games, obviously, because that's what most people do when they stream. And because I've always been a big fan of games, and that's something I wanted to talk about at some point on this podcast as well, which I likely will. I'll get there eventually when I'm like done talking about not Haikyuu. I was just talking to a friend about Haikyuu, My Hero Academia. But also, speaking of, expect some Haikyuu content coming soon, because I just recently got into that as well. And I love it just as much as, not more, but just as much as I enjoy My Hero Academia. But yeah, I think that covers everything I wanted to talk about quickly in this little like update spiel bit. But yeah, so on to this week's episode. I want to talk about Oboro, since he was finally introduced in the anime, as well as the Rooftop Boys, which, if you don't know, and I'll explain like that nickname here in a second, but it's Oboro, Aizawa, and Present Mic, and their duo dynamic. Well, there's trio dynamic. The three Domingos, I don't remember what they were called in the anime. But yeah, I want to talk about those three. Firstly, I want to talk about the anime and how they introduced Oboro a little bit, and then go a little bit more into his story. So, spoiler warnings if you haven't seen, I don't remember what episode it was. It's not the most recent one. It was the one before the My Villain Academia episode. And also, too, spoiler warning for if you haven't read Vigilantes, because I will be going more in depth into his story. Because I'm going to need to in order to explain some things later on when it comes to his relationship dynamic and like his impact on Aizawa more specifically, but like both Aizawa and Present Mic. And then also the effect the effects on their relationship as friends as well. But yeah, so I very much appreciated the way that the anime like kind of did a like too long, didn't read type of introduction to Oboro and who he is. Like, especially too when you're presented with like, oh, here's Kirigiri, who, surprise, is a Nomu, but even bigger surprise was created using the body of your dead friend from your high school years. And it's just like, oof, like that's a lot, but and the story goes deeper than that, but even at a base level, it's very sad if you can think when you think about it. But I love the little bits and pieces they decided to they chose to use to kind of give you a taste of like who Oboro was and what his character was like, and his just light-hearted personality, and just how much he like, I don't know how to explain it, but he very much like cared about others, and which we kind of see when Kirigiri talks about like his only concern is to like take care of Shigaraki and look after him. And yeah, so I very much like appreciate, as someone who knows Oboro's story fully, how they introduced that. I will say there are some things that I wish could have been included, but obviously with time restraints and all that, and like how much you can actually fit into an episode, I understand why they did it. And also too, it's kind of like just here's a taste of like what you kind of get in Vigilantes. Go read that to get more, you know? But yeah, like, especially too, because like in that scene, in that moment when we're with Aizawa and Present Mic in that interrogation room, I guess is what it was, where they're with Kirigiri and like trying to draw back memories or whatever, we kind of like one, through the flashbacks, but two, like we kind of see like how it has affected the two of them, and like especially too like how they feel about the situation. But like we don't like watching the anime only, you don't fully get like to the extent of like how much this truly means to them and affects them, which also too like we get a little sense in that moment as well as like how it's affected Aizawa, because then we get like a bit of like a glimpse of his, it's class 2A now, but it was like his class from the year prior, and we start to kind of understand why he teaches the way he does and why he is the way he is. So like I wish we got a little bit more into like this bit of his story that I'm about to get into, but again, like this part actually is a lot, and I know for a fact I wouldn't have fit into the episode as like it was set. But yeah, so with that being said, I am going to move on to like Aizawa and Oboro, and like the effects that Oboro had on Aizawa and who he is today and how he is today. Which again, like I mentioned before, we see a little bit of that in that episode where Aizawa like is very much affected by this. I mean, we see him cry, which we haven't really seen him show much emotion except for like worry for his students or like just annoyance or like unbotheredness. But like here we full on see him in like a moment of vulnerability, which is very interesting to see in his character. And like if you know me, like you know I love Aizawa. Like I mean, I did rank him number one of my pro heroes, but if I truly did have to redo that podcast episode where I ranked all of my favorite My Hero Academia characters, and like I couldn't use my subcategories, and it had to be like out of all the characters who are your top five, like Aizawa would be number one. Like I very much like his character for multiple reasons, and like this scene when I was reading the manga, this moment was what made me like, I had already loved him from the moment I saw him, but this moment made me fully understand why he is the way he is, and it made me fall in love with his character even more. But like we see that like he is hard on his students, and he like threatens expulsion because he, to them, that is a death, and it's explained in the a little bit in the anime episode and in the manga. But like he would rather them have this fake death, like a death of their dreams of being a hero, than them legitimately dying like while out there doing hero work, because that's what happened to Oboro, and he was there when it happened. Like it doesn't really explain that at all in the anime episode, but yes, Aizawa and Oboro did a work study, were like the agency they were doing their work study at, they did it together. So they were actually working together, helping, I think they were just helping like a daycare, like they were helping a group of kids cross the street or whatever, like a young group of kids, and I believe it was like a daycare worker they were helping out, like get the kids safely across the street when a villain attacked the city. And so like they had to jump into action, obviously, after making sure that the kids and all of them were safe. Like that was Oboro's like top priority. And this is when I'm going to get a little bit more into his backstory and like how it ties into things, and how like it affected, or why it affects Aizawa. And later I'll get into Present Mic when I talk about Present Mic, the way that it does. But Oboro and Aizawa were like helping these kids, and then this villain attacks, and in the midst of like trying to make sure everybody was like to safety or whatever, and he used his quirk, which is clouds, if you didn't know. His hero name was Loud Cloud, and his quirk was clouds. But Oboro, in a moment of using his quirk to protect others, he left himself open and ultimately was crushed by a building that was torn down by the villain and died. But Aizawa, who was fighting alongside him, did not realize that he had died in that moment. To him, he was still like, he was hurt, yes, but he was alive, and he had like hope that and faith that he was alive, and kept fighting because he knew that like in that moment he couldn't stop. And also too, like while he was fighting, which this part gets me every time I think about it, and I've been thinking about it a lot since that episode, so like I can talk about it on the podcast without getting emotional, because when I was originally going to record this, I kept tearing up, and like you could hear it in my voice, like my voice would crack and break because it very much hurts me thinking about it. But um, so while Aizawa was fighting, he actually recalls like hearing Oboro's voice, and Oboro cheering him on, like saying that he could do it, like because I believe Aizawa had like a moment of self-doubt, like he can't do this, like he won't be able to fight the villain and defeat him, because like the pro hero that they were studying under was like there, but like obviously it was a big scene, so like everyone was kind of scattered, and except for Oboro and Aizawa, who just already happened to be together. But he hears Oboro cheering him on the entire time, and Aizawa is in the end able to defeat the villain. And then he's cheering. He's like, "I did it! Like we did it!" And then he turns and sees like the medical personnel trying to recover Oboro's body, and it's in that moment that he realizes that his friend is gone, and but he still doesn't believe it. And I can't remember if it's Midnight who shows up or not, which I just realized in this moment. I've never explained why they're called the Rooftop Boys. I'll get to that here in a second. But I believe it was Midnight or the pro hero that they were working under. Somebody ended up telling him that Oboro had passed, and he was like, wait, what? Like, no, that doesn't make sense. Like, I heard him, like he was talking to me. So like like you can imagine how much that broke him to hear, and like just how devastating that moment had to be, especially too because like Aizawa before, which we see this a little bit in like the anime as well, is like Aizawa kind of was like an introvert. Well, he still kind of is, but Aizawa was an introvert, and like Oboro like reached out to him and was like, "Hey, like I'm Oboro Shirokuma, like let's be friends," type of vibes. I mean, and then Present Mic being like matching his extroverted like loud energy, just completed the trio. And the reason why I call them the Rooftop Boys, I know other people call them the Rooftop Boys, even though their like canonical name is like the Three Domingos, is because like they would gather on top of the rooftop of UA to eat lunch and stuff like that. And sometimes Midnight would join them, who was a year above them. So like when they were second years, because that's where Vigilantes like shows us is Aizawa's second year of high school. Midnight was a third year. So yeah, like that's why I call them the Rooftop Boys. But like Oboro really helped Aizawa come out of his shell a bit more, and then too in that scene with Kurogiri in the interrogation room, we see Aizawa like grasp at his goggles, and then we get that flashback of Oboro being like, "Here, you can use my goggles to help keep your eyes from getting too dry and like protecting them." And then the fact that like Aizawa keeps those goggles, like I was thinking about this the other day, and I was talking to a friend about it, and I almost started crying thinking about it. But I'm like, in a way, him keeping the goggles as a part of his hero costume is like honoring Oboro, and like, like because their whole thing was they were supposed to like open up their own agency when they graduated, but obviously like only two of the three were able to graduate, and it's like keeping the goggles as a part of his hero costume is like almost giving Oboro the chance to be a hero in a sense, if that makes sense at all. Like, like, look, we made it, we're heroes, like, we did it type of vibes. And like him holding his goggles in that moment where he's like on the verge of a breakdown because like he's having to relive these memories and these traumas of this friend that he saw die too young. And it's, I don't know, like, and then too, his goggles are such an iconic like staple of his hero costume. So the fact, like, knowing that that came from Oboro just means a lot. But yeah, and then too, like, Aizawa goes on to talk about like how that's why he's hard on his students, because he doesn't want a repeat of that situation. Like he, like I said, like explained, Oboro chose to put others before himself, which left him open to being crushed, which is why, like, especially when we see like with Deku, Aizawa's like, you can't keep like hurting yourself, like you gotta, like, you can't just be self-sacrificial type of vibes. Like we see that he's like that with him because he knows what it could lead to. And honestly, that kind of like makes things make sense a bit more to me about like Aizawa's like this displeasement, is that the word? I don't know, like how he doesn't really care for All Might, especially in the beginning, and like sees him as reckless and stuff, because he too sees that All Might's like self-sacrificial ways of like, he once he's the symbol and like does everything alone and all that jazz. And it's like, if you don't like yes, as a hero you are supposed to help others, but you also have to think of yourself at the same time and make sure that like you can continue to do this, you know? Because if you put too much emphasis on everybody else, you're eventually going to tear yourself down to the point where you can't do it anymore, in a sense, you know? So, which, speaking of All Might, that's likely going to be the next episode because I have a lot of thoughts on him. Especially upon recent realizations. But yes, so like it starts to make Aizawa seem less of like, oh, he's just this strict, annoying teacher, like who doesn't really care or whatever. But at the same time, like it allows you to see like he does care, and this is why he is the way he is, and all that. So yeah, I'm like, I very much appreciate the little bits that we did see in the anime. Like it does do a good enough job of like kind of explaining like this is why Aizawa is the way he is and stuff like that. But like when you have the full story, then it's like, okay, now you really understand why this truly hurts him and why he is really trying to make sure like his students make it to be heroes. And oh, there was another thought I had, but like it escaped me right at this moment. So yeah, I'm gonna move on from Aizawa, and if I remember what I was gonna say, then I'll jump back to him. But yeah, so I very much like appreciate that bit, as well as like it's funny to me and weird in a sense that like Oboro is only mentioned in, I believe he's only mentioned in that chapter of the manga as well, but it's like he has a big impact on this main story if you really can think about it, like because he has such a big impact on Aizawa and how he interacts with his students. Yet you wouldn't know that unless you read Vigilantes. So it's like, it's very much like nice to know that there is that supplemental reading that you could do to learn a bit more and like get a better context of these characters. But yeah, like there's other characters too that are in it that you would learn a bit more about, like Stain and who else? I have their names on the top of my head, and but Stain is one that you definitely learn about in Vigilantes. Aizawa is one. You get like Present Mic, obviously, because he's one of Aizawa's best friends in high school. You get a bit more of Midnight and Tensei, Ida's older brother. Like you get to see him. Like you get to see a lot of canonical characters like a bit more and learn a bit more about them. in vigilantes. So I read a little bit of it. I do like I'm currently going back to reread the main manga series from the beginning, because when I did read it, I just picked it up where the anime had left off. But now I want to go back and read from the beginning, because I've like since having read up and caught up to like the very recent chapters of the manga, and then now like watching things that I read be animated and seeing information be left out. It's like, okay, I wonder what else was left out in the beginning that we like didn't know. That helps you to better understand the characters. But anyway, I just completely got sidetracked from the original topic. But yeah, so on to Present Mic. Okay. We don't see as much as like, because Present Mic isn't so much of a main character, it's more of a side character, but we still in that moment get a bit of like who Present Mic is, and like how the Oboro situation affected him, and like how like that also reflects in his friendship with Aizawa and his care for his friend as well. But like, because in the beginning we see like Present Mic sitting here like, oh, like who would do that? And he like very much doubts that like Kurogiri is the shell of Oboro at first, until like I forget what he says exactly, but he does make a comment after like Kurogiri is like, my only task and my only mission is to care about the well-being of Tomura Shigaraki. I just butchered his name, Tomura Shigaraki. And then Present Mic says something about like, wow, you don't even care about yourself. You're like something along those lines of like not caring for himself, and like his only focus is somebody else. But he cuts himself off because he realizes in that moment, like, oh snaps, like that is Oboro's personality right there. And then too, I very much love like that quick like it seems small, but like he quickly looks towards Aizawa in that moment, because he's like in that moment of realization that that is Oboro, the shell of Oboro sitting in front of him. His immediate reaction is to check up on his friend who's sitting right next to him, because he knows it affected him more than it did himself, as like Present Mic did a work study at a different agency, so he wasn't there at the moment of the crime or at the moment of the fight. And he does show up, like come by later, and like him and Aizawa were just kind of sitting there looking at the building like, I can't believe this happened type of vibes. But yeah, like there's like a strong look of care and concern in his face, like seeing Aizawa sit there and like kind of just have a moment. And then later in the like spoilers for later in the manga, which we'll see this likely later. Hopefully they include it in the anime. I'll be so sad if they don't include this moment, because it was very funny to me the first time I read it. But later when they are fighting like the doctor and like the league, and it's in the war arc of the manga, but in that moment, like Present Mic goes toe to toe with the doctor who's like responsible for creating the Nomus and essentially creating Kurogiri. And so Present Mic punches the doctor like in the face or something like that. He punches him though, and it looked like he punched him hard. And he's like, and that's for making my friend cry. And which is in reference to like him using Oboro as Kurogiri's shell, which resulted in Aizawa crying, shedding tears. And he's like, and that just shows like how much that like he cares for Aizawa, he cares about Aizawa. And I don't know, that was just a very comedic moment to me, and I've like loved it. And I was like, you know what, same, Mike, same, like you deserve that for making Aizawa cry. No one should make this man cry, you know. But yeah, like I just very much like loved seeing that. And oh, what else was I gonna say? Oh, and then there was I don't like how the anime switched around the My Villain Academia arc with the Endeavor Agency arc, because there's like because of the way they cut it, they had to cut out this bit from the episode, like, right after, unless they like throw it in later, but I don't think they are, because now the focus is the villains. It's not even going to be on the students or anything at UA. But there was, like, after they left the prison and went back to, like, the teacher's dorm, there's a moment between Aizawa and Mike where we get a little bit more insight into their friendship, and their dynamic, and, like, also too, we see a bit more of, like, how it affected, like, the situation affected both of them. More so Mike, because, like, Aizawa's just kind of sitting there and he's just like, what's on your mind? Like, what are you thinking about right now? Like, kind of just checking. And, like, it's, again, like, how Present Mike showed, like, concern for Aizawa. Like, Aizawa is returning that favor in this moment. And Hisashi is sitting there, like, still can't believe it, and he's so angry and wants to, like, and in that moment he wants to fight the people responsible, which, and later on he does get the chance to, but he's like, but he also too at the same time wants to forget that it exists, that it's a thing that happened, and yeah, but then he does, like, ask Aizawa, like, how does he feel about it? But by then they get cut off by, like, something happening. I don't remember fully, but it's like that. It's a very solemn moment between the two of them, kind of just reflecting on, like, wow, that really did just happen. Like, we really just kind of talked to our friend who we lost years ago and thought we would never meet again, essentially. At least not in this life. But yeah, and then having to live through those traumas and stuff. But yeah, no, like, there's just a lot with their dynamic, and especially too, like, Oboro's influence on those two, mostly Aizawa, that, like, I very much, like, I enjoyed, like, learning about when I first read it, and I enjoyed seeing them adapt it as well. But yeah, if you haven't read Vigilantes to get the full story, because I'm sure I, like, kind of butchered some of it. It's been a while since I, like, really learned over a story, but, like, I would highly recommend it. And I think that's all I have to say for this episode. It's not as long as some of my episodes, but there wasn't much really to say about this. I mean, there was and there wasn't, but yeah. So I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, let me know. I would very much love to hear your feedback on things, and you can leave that as, like, I don't know if Spotify does reviews, but if they do, let me know there. This will be also posted on YouTube. You can let me know there as well in the comments, or you can tweet at me. Let me know what you think. Again, my Twitter is at myherocorpse. MyHeroCorpse on Twitter. Or anywhere else. I also have a card for the podcast. It's FGFO podcast, podcast .card CARRD.co, and not only is there a link to all the places you can listen to the podcast, if, like, you're listening on one platform and maybe another one would be better for you, I don't know, as well as, like, a link to all my socials where you can find me, and you can let me know there on any of those. But yeah, let me know what you guys think. What are your thoughts on the whole situation? Do you wish we could have gotten a little bit more of Oboro, or a little bit, or do you wish we would have gotten that moment about love, like Aizawa and Hisashi recapping what they just experienced and stuff? Or I don't know. Just let me know your thoughts. But that's going to be it for this episode. Again, like I said at the beginning, take care of yourselves, drink some water if you haven't drank water recently or at all today. And I'm going to try to stick to the schedule, but if I don't, it is what it is. And you can also get up-to-date updates on that by following me on Twitter. But yeah, that's all. Hope you have a great day, night, evening, whenever you're listening to this. And I'll see you guys next time, or talk to you guys next time. Peace.